Check one, check two. Check one, check two. I think we are going. We're live and we are recording. Hello, happy whatever day of the week it is that you're watching this. I know that I am recording it pretty late in the week, but I did have some travel earlier. Yeah, purpose of this bit of video, this is the Module 2 quick recap and introduction to week 3. So, should be fun. Let's just get into this. What I have up here is my quick recap from the live session last week. Thanks for everybody that made it, and no worries if you didn't. Hopefully, you watched the original recording of Module 2. But yeah, the purpose of week 2, we're kind of going away from this idea of thinking like a data scientist and actually starting to put hands on keyboard and being a creator. And how do we start creating data science? And of course, we do that by using programming. Big ideas of programming. I want you to think of the four pillars of computer science or computer programming, variables and data structures, loops, iterations, conditionals like if else, and finally functions and classes or just functions. So the way I like to think about it, first we start with the nouns, right? These are our variables and data structures. We talked about how variables have data types such as ints, floats, and strings, and how different data structures allow us to store information within them. For example, lists, sets, tuples, dictionaries. And when we start combining different data structures with different data types of information within them, we end up with information that computers can interact with and use. A very popular way that data vendors and computers talk to each other is with APIs, which sends those data structures of information across the internet as JSON. Once we understand those basic blocks of nouns, we can see how more complex data structures can be down the line. So, data frames within pandas and NumPy arrays, right? Finally, with each of these nouns, we have verbs. This is where both the second and third I guess, pillar of data of computer programming come into play. How do we control what happens to those nouns? Well, we do that with conditionals. This is where if one thing is true, we go down one path, and if something else is true, then we go down another. And then iteration, how do we do the same logic multiple times? We can do for loops, which is a specific number of loops. I want to do this 10 times, or while loops go until something is true or something happens. Finally, we construct our program using these nouns and verbs, and when we're done, we want to make sure that it's repeatable and reusable. To do this, we can use functions and classes to make different bits of programming accessible to other parts of a larger program. Functions and classes go into a big idea of don't repeat yourself, which is that if you're writing the same piece of code over and over again, how can we not do that? How can we be much more efficient? How can we wrap that into a function or something that's referenceable, right? So don't repeat yourself, especially with a logic. And then, yeah, at the end of week 2, we kind of strung all those building blocks together and kind of walked through what an example data workflow might be, where we're accessing, cleaning, and preparing data for downstream analysis. To close out week 2, we do have a quiz. You have multiple attempts and it's open notes. And one thing that I recommend is that if the question is, what does this code do? Or does this code work? You are more than welcome to take that code, post it or paste it into a Jupyter notebook, and then just check it live. Why not, right? So here's what I recommended. Just within the lab environment, right click, make a new notebook, and just call it something. Again, I also reviewed that in the end of the lecture. Cool. Yeah, some things not to worry about, at least at the end of week 2. Getting into specifics about things like matrix multiplications or other certain mathematical functions that we reviewed. The beautiful soup details. The last workflow was an example of how computer programming can be used for data workflows. We're going to dive more into beautiful soup in week 3. And then finally, syntax. Syntax just comes with time, just like practicing any foreign language. Writing out computer code takes practice, right? So hopefully over the next 10 weeks, you should hopefully end up having better syntax as we go along here. Cool. If you have any questions about Module 2, drop it in the chat or in our forums. Finally, for this week in Module 3, we're actually going to dive deeper into that data engineering workflow and what it typically looks like in the real world. So we're going to dive deeper into web scraping with Beautiful Soup, data acquisition from places like APIs or HTML files, data cleaning. Once we've acquired this data, how do we make sure that columns, data types, the information is ready to go for actual data products, I guess, creation. And then finally, again, what this would look like in the real world. Yeah, it's a pretty short week, so maybe I'll dive deeper into week 3 now. For my week 3 full week preview, because I knew that I was going to be out of town, I kind of wrote this up. So it's basically what I was going to talk about when I review week 3. So it's kind of long, but hopefully you end up reading it here. All right, so yeah, big idea for week 3. We're going to be extracting data using Beautiful Soup and the requests library. We're going to be pulling data from APIs as well as HTML pages that we scrape, and then we're going to try and visualize them in Matplotlib. We'll review the IBM Cloud activity in a minute. Cool. Let's see. I thought I had my images. Oh, there are my GitHub. Yeah, so everything for module 3, all the notebooks and everything as you work through the different media sets, I've already ran and backed those up, and we will be reviewing a few of them live. Like I said, it's a pretty short week, and if I go into my module 3, boom. Yeah, we have this thing right here, but we can see all the different notebooks, and it's really not that many. And only 3.5 is the optional session. I think it's only 3 notebooks in total, so we may end up going through all of them. But yeah, big idea. It's kind of fun. We're gonna be actually pulling real data on kind of real companies and visualizing them. So here's my big ideas in my GitHub. Again, this is the README file. HTML. How do we use HTML? How do we scrape information out of HTML? So we'll talk about markup languages, web scraping using kind of all the beautiful soup syntax I told you not to worry about at the end of module 2, and then kind of the full lab that we're going to be doing, pulling stock data from Apple and Tesla, I think, and then visualizing that information as graphs. Ooh. And what is your recommendation after performing this analysis? I should have put stocks and put my money into stocks in 2010. Um, cool. Or put my some money into Tesla in 2010. Or in GameStop. There we go. Maybe I shouldn't tell you if I put money into GameStop during its bull run. But anyway, let's see. Cool. It should be a fun week. I'm excited. All right, so now let's get into some logistics of things because there's a few things that there's a few problems that I've identified that's been pretty recurring over the last couple of weeks. So first, what do you do if the IBM lab environment is not doing well? Maybe it's just not working, the kernel's not turning on, the page isn't loading, etc. Well, my recommendation instead is to use a service known as Google Colab. So here's if you remember the IBM how the IBM notebooks work, it's just a notebook running on a computer in IBM's cloud, and every major cloud allows you to basically do that. So here we go. We see the IBM lab has loaded up and is spinning. And again, this will probably work this time, but like forever, if just for some reason it's down or it's not working, how can we run this lab inside of some environment? So to work or to do this and have this work with Google Colab, we're going to go to this URL, right? colab.research.google.com. Note, you can also open this from Google Drive. I'm not going to show you my Google Drive, but trust me, I think you have to add it as like an extension or an application or something on top of it. But yeah, here we go. I just went to this URL right here, and it's saying to either create a notebook or load a notebook from GitHub or upload a file or even from Google Drive. So as I said, I've actually backed up every notebook into my GitHub, but yeah, you have a couple of options. The first would be just download this yourself, right click on the notebook and then just download. And then if you go to Google Colab, you can go to upload and upload the notebook that we just posted. Boom. And then you should be able to run it. Success. Yay. Oh, and here is the notebook. Cool. The other way to do it is to actually load it up through my GitHub link if you want my backup of so you know it's the latest and greatest and definitely works because I just ran it. So to do that, we're gonna go to GitHub. It's gonna want a URL. And what I just recommend doing is going to the notebook you want and then grabbing the full URL from up here. One thing to note is that this ends in IPYMB. That's kind of what uh, Google Colab's looking for. And that was actually a good question about yeah, perfect. There it is. That's actually a good question because when someone tried to load a notebook like this into Watson, which is basically like another kind of cloud platform for running notebooks and stuff like that on IBM, it has to actually clone from a URL. And so if you don't include that extension .ipymb, then pulling the notebook into a Jupyter notebook environment on the cloud is not going to work. As once you're in Google Colab, whether you use the Google or the GitHub link or a downloaded version of the file, you click connect up here to connect to a kernel, kind of similar to IBM. This is going to be that virtual machine running on Google Cloud Platform. And there we should be able to start running stuff. And I think, oh, I need to comment these in if we are in cloud. So this should hopefully just work. This I shouldn't be running like pip installs, but yeah, here we go. So this will just run just like it's normally gonna do. And then yeah, most of these libraries and things will already be there. So if you run into any library issues though on Google Cloud or Google Colab, let me know and we'll try and fix it for you. Yeah, this one should work. Yay, there we go. And then whenever we do something like this. Cool. All right. That is the first logistic that I wanted to go over. What to do if the labs are not loading for some reason. I've also linked my repository. If you actually do this link without the note the extension in Colab only because it's opening from GitHub. Um, but yeah, I'm not gonna demo it. My recommendation would be to always pull the specific notebook with the file extension that you want loaded. Cool. Also, yeah, Google Colab is free, but there's obviously paid tiers with better compute and stuff. So we'll just be using the free tier in this class as a backup if needed. That's a perfect fallback. Good job, past me. Let's see. And the last thing is what supplementary material can you do if we have a pretty light week like we did in week 3? What I recommend is Kaggle Learn. Kaggle is a very popular location for both open source data sets, but also free learning, right? For data science and machine learning. I know a few of you know what Kaggle is because I saw you share data sets in the Module 2 forum from Kaggle. But yeah, if we go to kaggle.com, so I'm just gonna go and then you should be able to go to courses. I typically always just go to Google, kaggle.com/learn. You'll see all of these free micro courses that they offer in data science and machine learning. Again, we're going to be covering a lot of this stuff in this course, so it's very kind of relevant and valuable. Diving into some of these for weeks, Module 2 and Module 3, the Intro to Programming, Python, and to some extent, Pandas will be pretty relevant. I think Pandas is more week 4 though. All right, but if we go to Intro to Programming, yeah, you'll see what is a variable, what is a function, what are data types, conditionals, and lists. Sounds very familiar. That's exactly what we did in week 2. I would say you should be able to knock this out in 2 hours. And the Python one, which gets more Pythonic specific things involved. So Booleans, lists, strings, dictionaries, and loading in libraries. So again, very similar to what we did in week 2 and week 3 as well. We're gonna dive deeper into pandas and all these functions, and I think that will be data visualization here when we get into matplotlib. These are going to be very relevant in the next upcoming weeks. And then when we jump into SQL, we even have a couple of SQL Kaggle learns here as well. To me, all of these should take between 2 to 4, 3 to 5 hours. And again, if you have some extra time during the week, then definitely go ahead, dive in, knock those out, and get some additional learning to really kind of help this sink in. Again, remember we talked about learning syntax requires time and repetition. Well, you need practice to kind of get that, right? So definitely use some of these external supplementary materials as ways to get that practice. And also, yeah, just a fun thing with Kaggle, if you do finish each micro course will come with its own unique certificate with kind of your name and the date, which is kind of fun. So some people like collecting all of them. I had most of them until they added like some new courses fairly recently. But you can share them on LinkedIn or just put them in GitHub or just cite them as some of that proof that you know what to do or proof that you supplemented the coursework in your professional portfolio. Finally, if you're a student, we got a little bit lost at the end of last class when I was trying to find the announcements as we all had kind of a different view. Let me actually jump over here. If I change my view to a student, I figured out how to do this. Switch role to a student. Ooh, magic. If I'm a student and I go to from my sidebar, I don't see the things about live sessions. I don't see the things about announcements. I don't see the shortcut to the labs. I know that's my little secret. But I do see up over here this tab. So how do I get to this? If you're on like one of the modules for any reason, you should just be able to scroll kind of up. Well, let me get into one of them. I forgot that maybe they're locked for me because I never did my orientation. But anyway, if I if all I have to do is go back up and click on this general up here at the top, and then I should be able to go to announcements and resources, and that's the big one. Over here, I should be able to see all of those additional things that I have in my left sidebar. So, shortcut to the announcements, a shortcut to the live sessions, and I don't think anyone's like near each other, but I think we did have like, yeah. I guess you can talk to yourself or use Meetup or whatever here. Yeah, we don't check. I don't check these. But yeah, if I go to the announcements, I should be able to see kind of my announcements tab over here, and you'll see that I like big ideas and links again. So basically, if you don't want to keep jumping between all the different lounges, then you can typically come to this announcements thread and you'll see like a recap of the last session and then the preview for the next session, right? Just all in one place. So that's kind of a nice centralized view of everything. And then if you want to get that centralized view of the live sessions too, if you click on live session over here, again, I'm as a student, this should hopefully render a zoom. Oh my God, great job. It iframe zoom in here. And I can go into cloud recordings and I can actually see the last two live sessions we did. Yeah, these are two separate ones. So this is the week 2 live session, and I can just watch the recording. So that's another way to get to the recording if you don't find the link or don't check my YouTube. Remember, I back up all of these to YouTube as well. And then if you wanted to always find the recording for our next live session, it's right here. And you can just click this join, and that should load Zoom for you. Sweet. Oh, and then there's a couple of questions about Watson and this Watson AI. So module 3 is kind of an interesting one. There'll be a few that have this, but they'll have this idea of an enrichment activity. An enrichment activity is just an optional activity. Nothing covered in the enrichment activity should be in the quiz, the assessment. Oh, I forgot that I'm as a student. I need to get rid of my return to my normal role. Nothing that's covered in the enrichment activities should be mentioned in the end of module quizzes, and isn't really needed to be able to do anything in this class, or for the capstone and stuff for like graduating. But yeah, you set up IBM Watson here. I may walk through it in class tomorrow. If not, I will. No, I will. I'm recording this. I actually have all these instructions backed up in my GitHub as well. But basically, you have to log in, create this Watson thing. It's gonna be like SageMaker if you know SageMaker in AWS. But it's gonna spin up a studio, and then you can create or import notebooks in that studio, and then run them on compute. If that sounds like Google Colab, yeah, I told you every cloud has all of this stuff. Cool. But yeah, it's completely optional. And when you're loading in notebooks, make sure to use the URLs that end in the .ipynb. And you can also skip into activity two, which is where you just create a notebook from scratch. One quick note, basically the images. Let's see if I had my I guess not. A lot of the images you may see on here. Where is it? Oh my God, I lost it. I'll just put it from my GitHub. A lot of the images you may see on the instructions, they may have changed, mostly because like these screenshots are kind of old. So depending on kind of what it looks like, or maybe even in your own region. Sorry, my whole laptop screen is on black. Depending on like where you are and how long ago these images are from, it's more than likely IBM updated their user interface and experience. But you should see something that's hopefully along the lines of these images. There shouldn't be anything too drastically different. Cool. We got this example of creating the Jupyter notebook and running these Python notebooks on another cloud provider or on another cloud service. All right. I think that is all I have for Module 2, Module 3. Hopefully, I kept this around 15, 20 minutes. And I will see you all in our next live session, which is tomorrow. So if you're seeing this somehow before our live session, don't forget to log into class. All right. Thanks, everybody. I will see you all then. Have a great night. And again, post any questions into the forums as needed. Have a good one.